It is 1:30. It looks like we've got everyone. And in the interest of time, and because we have guests from outside Ramsey County joining us to present today, I just want to make sure that we're respectful of everyone's time. We will get started. So we are back here again on the Economic Competitiveness and Inclusion Vision Plan for Ramsey County. As you remember, throughout 2020, we have been leading the development of a comprehensive economic development strategy centered around equitable growth and strengthening the economic competitiveness. That's a lot of C's in our sentence this afternoon. This effort, which has been shaped and informed by the voices from throughout the county, has been impacted by and is adapting to the current COVID-19 health and economic crisis. The plan will provide direction on future county investments related to housing, jobs, and workforce. With this presentation is our fourth in a series. As you know, we've heard presentations to the board and the HRA. On July 7th, we had an HRA housing analysis. October 6th, we went to the board with a fiscal analysis. On November 10th, the board received the economic analysis. And today, probably the most exciting part is we're going to talk about a strategic overview. And so with us, we have the county commissioners, but we also have our partners who have been engaged in this work together, Tawana Black from the Center of Economic Inclusion and Josh Devine from Fourth Economy. And I also just want to say a special shout out to Josh, who is joining us one last time, even though he has taken a new position with a new firm in Washington, D.C. So congrats to Josh. But because he was engaged in this work and committed to this project, he has come back to join us this one last time. And so we're ever grateful to have him here. With that, I'm going to turn it over to County Manager O'Connor, and then we'll get started. One other piece before Ryan takes over, I just want to say that because we have a lot of information and we have guests, we're going to ask you to hold all your questions and write them down or whatever as we go, and then until Josh is done presenting, and then we'll open up for questions before we wrap up with Carrie. So go ahead, Ryan. County Manager, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, it's yours.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Sorry for just jumping on. We've been busy. Really excited to come back and have one more conversation here today on the Economic Competitiveness and Inclusion Plan. It's been a lot of process. You'll see the steps again today as we go through it. But hopefully this will leave the board feeling comfortable about the steps as we go out to begin to engage broader stakeholders across Ramsey County into the new year. We've been trying to take that piece to heart as we go. And finally, just as a personal part on the way in, Josh has been great to work with throughout this project. It sounds like Josh has taken a new job outside of fourth sector. So, I'm stealing his touchdown dance a little by saying that up front, but I wanted to personally note how great it has been to work with him throughout this entire project. He's brought a lot of energy and vision to the project and an outside view of our own region, and he will be missed, but cheered on as he takes on a super new cool job, and partnerships are always forming. So we aren't going to say goodbye to him, but I wanted to call that out at the outset today and say thanks to Josh. I want to turn it over to the all-stars here presenting today, and I believe, to Tawana Black, who's going to take us through some of the information, and I hope today's conversation is good. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you to the commissioners for hosting us on this morning or afternoon now. The day has gone by quite fast. We're excited to be able to join you this afternoon to share more about where we are with this project. I want to start by reminding you again why we're centering equity and why you've chosen, honestly, to be able to center equity in this plan. We know from studies that have been done by many, certainly the Met Council, Economic Policy Institute, and many others, and certainly Policy Link, as well as the Center for Economic Inclusion, that when we center racial equity, when we center those populations that have been historically excluded from our region's economy and from prosperity in our economy, it benefits all of us and it helps our economy move forward. And that is one of the first reasons for us to center racial equity and our Black, Native American, Latinx, and Asian populations in our policies in land use, housing, economic development and growth, workforce development, and more as we move forward. We also know from the statistics that you see on the screen here that it pays dividends back forward if we're intentional about doing so in many of our policies moving forward, whether it is our opportunities to be able to address the shortage that we see in our talent gap for many of our employers throughout Ramsey County, or our opportunities to see investments spurring forward by investing in those businesses that are owned by our BIPOC populations, or our opportunities to see opportunities for addressing land use and being more intentional about our investments in centering these populations all throughout the county in partnerships with different cities, in partnerships with developers and owners, in being able to stimulate economic growth through advancing racial equity. It strengthens our ability to compete. More than that, though, there's also an opportunity for us to be intentional in our thoughts about wealth extraction that has occurred over a number of generations, and not seeing this as simply about charity or about benefiting communities, but about being very intentional about where Ramsey County can partner with local governments and state government, with our private sector and banking industries, about righting wrongs of the past while also stimulating economic growth for the future in ways that can be very intentional in communities like the Rondo community and others throughout Ramsey County, where we have opportunities to really think about where we have right now true loss occurring in communities, but could be very intentional about stimulating economic growth with that lens toward wealth extraction in the past and wealth valuation and increases in the future. We want to be intentional with you as we see policies coming forward in the strategies that you'll see some early recommendations for today and final recommendations for in the first quarter of 2021 as we move forward in centering equity. Next slide, please. One of the things that we want to continue highlighting for you is all of the engagement that has taken place over the last several months. Thousands of participants throughout Ramsey County have been involved in this process, and we could not have done this work without them. 23 community meetings have been held. This work has been largely led by NAO Partners, our lead in this part of the work. Denetric Powers has led the community engagement strategies, partnering with all of the consultants in this work to host public community meetings. Our consultants have partnered with your team to host our working group sessions, our strategy build sessions and steering committee meetings, as well as engaging leaders and entities throughout the region in community action team meetings, our Ramsey board meetings with you all, our housing town hall meetings, and we've conducted interviews with more than 26 people and entities, making sure that as many voices as possible have been involved in not only helping us understand what's happening today, but also what has occurred throughout Ramsey County over a number of years, both so we could understand what has worked well, what hasn't worked, and what could work in the future. What could work both inside Ramsey County as an entity, as well as how the strategies that we bring forward to you in the first quarter can complement work that's already taking place throughout the county and throughout the state of Minnesota to move forward this economy, making sure that, as we know, no one organization or one entity can close the racial income and wealth gaps that occur in Ramsey County, or can stimulate economic competitiveness and sustain it by itself. But the work that you all commit to doing must be surrounded, anchored, and amplified by a number of entities. So we've gone about this community engagement process in a way that makes sure that you have solid partners who are walking in solidarity with you, committed to doing this work for a number of years, and who have aligned values and commitments in a number of different sectors, arenas, and in a number of racial and ethnic communities and businesses in order to ensure that it occurs over a number of years. Nearly 2,000 visitors has also visited the website that was established for this project, eliciting 124 responses to the questions that we outlined in the beginning of this project and adapted over the project's time period to ensure that we were also able to get feedback there. Next slide, please. We wanted to be able to highlight the timeline for this engagement process as well, just to be able to again highlight the number of places and ways where we've gotten feedback throughout the process. Our steering committee meetings have continued to occur throughout this process. As you know, we adapted them as a result of COVID-19, but we've been really pleased by the number of people who have remained very committed to continuing to engage in this. We've had a number of entities who have not only had one person engaged, but have had a number of their staff members engaged in this process at both the steering committee, advisory group levels, build sessions, interviews, and a number of other ways to ensure, again, that as many people show up in this work and show up in this plan, both in their official capacities at times as Ramsey County residents, property and business owners, and are donating their expertise and time and talent in as many ways as are necessary to formulate the very best plan that we can have. And that at the end of the day, they're invested not only in the creation of the plan, but also in the long-term implementation of it, walking alongside as your partners in solidarity. I'll turn it over now to our partners.
Hello, everyone. Firstly, thanks for all of your kind thoughts at the top of this meeting. Ramsey and this work is very near and dear to my heart, so I'm super excited to be here with you all today. But I have the pleasure of walking you through our strategy areas that have been emerging and have developed throughout the engagement process as outlined by Tawana. So all of our analysis and engagement has kind of culminated into 8 strategies that fall into 2 particular buckets. There's place-based inclusion, where actions really help to create more resilient and equitable communities. And then it's economic competitiveness, where actions are centered around strengthening the county's innovation position, but also really ushering in a new way of economic growth, a more transformational way of economic growth. It's not to say that these kind of 8 strategies across these 2 areas aren't interrelated, because they are. Building more inclusive places for people to live and work truly incentivizes new business growth and opportunity. And likewise, when we begin to strengthen our businesses and kind of take a firm stance on innovation, it creates new jobs and new opportunities for residents to provide livable wages, for example. So these 2 must truly go hand in hand if we want to ensure that Ramsey is both resilient in the future, inclusive, but also just fiscally responsible. However, there are some strategies that kind of focus primarily around place and infrastructure, and others that are more catered and centered around business and innovation. So we wanted to break it up in this particular format. So I will walk you through each of these sections to highlight at a high level some actions within them and some data that kind of justifies our reasoning. And as noted earlier, you feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat. I think the rest of the team is here to respond to them, but I will kind of pause at the end of my overview for any additional thoughts and questions you might have. So let's begin by talking about our kind of place-based inclusion strategies. So if you recall from our housing session a few months ago, Ramsey County, what we understand about our analysis is that Ramsey County is relatively affordable. So as the population grows and the county becomes a choice destination for families, we see that the cost of living is continuing to rise. And what we know is that that's leaving those who are cost burdened most vulnerable. And this vulnerability kind of persists in light of COVID, which we know the county has responded well to, but families are still at risk, and there's certain individuals and residents who are still facing housing barriers. So the priority in this particular kind of section here is that the county kind of step up to, advance its pace of affordable housing production and preserving affordability, and really thinking strategically about developing new places and new spaces and creating almost, in a sense, a new development approach that addresses some of the issues such as land or limited land availability, to think about industry and new opportunities and where they are located, and if they're located close to housing, how the county can think smarter about infrastructure, particularly infrastructure in declining markets. So how to reimagine those spaces, and overall thinking about development to ensure or to combat displacement over time. So over the next few years, through this suggested roadmap here, it's our hope that the county can commit to doing 4 things to kind of encourage place-based inclusion. One is to continue to preserve and increase the supply of affordable housing, particularly housing at housing for lowest income residents. Expanding affordable home ownership and kind of targeting those services to communities who have been historically underinvested and have experienced historic wealth extraction. Speaking specifically about transit and fostering inclusive economic development as transit planning happens, and then thinking more so in terms of equitable site development for housing in support of communities. So I would like to walk through each of these 4 areas or strategy areas just a bit further. So when we're talking about preserving and increasing supply, there's a number of roles the county can play, and this kind of roadmap presents some actions for the county to support this. In some way, it's about playing a more direct financing role in terms of leveraging its levy funds for gap financing, for example. Other actions speak to providing a more advocacy role in kind of supporting innovation housing construction models, or brokering the partnerships between energy partners to ensure energy efficient building that actually reduces the cost of production. So across those key roles, be it a financing role or advocacy role, there's a number of recommendations related to preserve and increase supply. And because the data shows the need for housing being greatest among households that are at or below 30% AMI, actions within the strategy focuses on that particular price point. Uniquely, the existence of natural occurring affordable housing presents kind of a first step for the county in this regard to kind of preserve these units to achieve its affordable housing goals. And much of those actions are under this particular strategy. Secondly, when we consider expanding affordable home ownership, or when we consider wage disparities, for example, across the county, or the slow pace of housing production, and even the growing market pressures that are pushing those kind of affordability limits of natural occurring affordable housing, the most marginalized are at a disadvantage. So this second strategy actually brings to bear the county's commitment to inclusive growth by placing its focus on housing stability, and doing so in communities that are in need most. So there are actions within this strategy for the county to lead the region in terms of a housing reparations program, for example, where you're providing more support to historically displaced communities. Actions also speak to increasing individual supports for homeowners throughout the AMI continuum through grants and low interest loans. But ultimately, really just increasing the housing service delivery across the board for those who need it most, particularly the homeless, for example, or those who are facing evictions. The interesting quote on this slide about public transit from a White Bear Lake resident really speaks to, one, thinking about housing investment and development in terms of shortening the distance for residents to work. So really creating these live to work communities, but also taking note of how housing along transit and how affordability of those units are threatened by market pressures. So this third strategy to foster inclusive economic development within transit corridors speaks to both of those prongs. So the county is uniquely positioned to kind of guide the development of community partners as transit planning takes place. This could mean leveraging new and existing funds to either acquire or develop housing along these corridors. This can also mean prioritizing investment in redevelopment along public land around transit to ensure, or even to ensure that existing funds prioritizes affordable housing and community needs. So there's a bit of an economic case for equitable transit-oriented development in that you're reducing the cost of workers who travel longer to get to work. But there's also a fiscal health component to this where the county should be thinking about density along its transit corridors and ensuring that the right measures are taken to combat displacement as that development happens. And that is what leads us to our last strategy session here, which is around supporting communities in equitable development equitable site development. So thinking innovatively around housing development as the county develops new housing. Actions within this strategy really speak to encouraging how innovative housing types or alternative construction models. Actions also speak to things like supporting a diverse set of local developers, developers of color, essentially, creating quality places, utilizing local and diverse contractors to support this housing development, and thinking about communities and main streets and housing and how the county can support along those particular corridors as well. So that is our place strategies. Again, it's around preserving and increasing supply. It's expanding affordable home ownership in communities that need it the most. It's fostering transit-oriented or equitable transit-oriented development, and then thinking about site development or housing development more equitably as well. Moving on from place to economic competitiveness. Again, there are four strategies that fall under this particular bucket. So economic stability has been a strength for the county in terms of industry diversity, yet steady and slow growth has allowed regional peers in other benchmark areas to kind of outshine the county's kind of economic advantage. And softening this advantage is the low wages we see across racial groups and industries. And of course, COVID has impacted these industries and really placed an uncertainty of the future of work over the next few years. And the world is facing similar challenges, but we believe that the cluster growth that we see in the county related to high wage industries and even this kind of hyper local kind of diverse business growth and strengthening that growth are key ingredients to Ramsey County's kind of recovery and taking advantage or strengthening that competitiveness across the regional peers. So for this recovery to happen, investments are needed. We heard from the community, and as we discussed last time in our kind of economic analysis, we need to strengthen our ability to lend to small businesses for growth and expansion, because we know that investing in small businesses is creating new jobs. But in addition, also strengthening the pathways to employment, as well as being better partners to communities who are responding to business and workforce needs, or those who are unable to respond to those needs because of capacity issues or others. So this roadmap will encourages Ramsey County to commit to doing these four things. One, to sustain the workforce recovery programs that have been brought about and funded by relief efforts due to COVID-19, to continue to develop entrepreneurial pathways, particularly for BIPOC individuals and business owners. Thirdly, to attract high wage industry and innovation. And we believe that putting investments in technology and advanced manufacturing and life sciences really plays a unique role in recovery over time. And then lastly, strengthening capacity of business retention and expansion to support communities across the county. So again, let's walk quickly through each of these particular areas. So related to COVID-19 workforce recovery programs, we heard from the community how important it is to center workforce efforts around existing residents. So it's one thing to attract new talent into the region, but how's the county responding to providing opportunities for those who are and underemployed? And this is more of an imperative because of COVID-19. So the county's workforce opportunity here is to scale existing COVID-19 efforts. And much of this work will be around funding and expanding kind of the influence and leadership of the Workforce Solutions Department. So as industry changes and COVID gets stronger, or the county can further respond to the needs by doing a few things: retaining those who are out or retraining those who are out of work, funding high impact COVID recovery programs that have been launched over the year, and more specifically, utilizing real-time workforce data to align or realign the system in the system of workforce partners to respond accordingly. So the Workforce Solutions Department could help engage with private industry, can continue partnership with workforce training providers, with the ultimate goal to make sure that those who have lost work can find it again, that businesses can adapt as the need arises, and as business opportunities emerge, that residents have access to those particular jobs. That's the crux of this particular strategy. Moving on to developing a pathway to entrepreneurship and supporting BIPOC business ownership. The pathway to wealth for many residents, and even the pathway to innovation, you would argue, is through entrepreneurship and small business growth. So this strategy calls for increased development of and activation of entrepreneurial pathways for BIPOC individuals, but also continuing to provide COVID-19 recovery and relief efforts and funding in support of these small businesses as well. This way, the county can, keep pace with the rate of business growth that we see regionally and nationally, and kind of carve out a path to support businesses who need them the most. There's a interesting role the county can play also in this strategy to partner with organizations who are on the ground, who are already responding to these needs. So how do we increase this partnership and increase the county's advocacy in support of these businesses who need relief the most? Strategy 7 within our economic competitiveness kind of bucket is around attracting high-wage industries and innovation. So when we're speaking about things like entrepreneurship, we're not just talking about any industry, but we want to center our work around industries that we know will provide high wages for owners and job seekers. So this strategy is, in a sense, multi-pronged in that the actions within them even go beyond just general, let's participate in attraction efforts. Let's, encourage new incentives to support medical device companies, for example. But the focus in this particular strategy is around accelerating opportunities for immigrant entrepreneurship, which we know is a regional strength and could be a way for the county to carve out a role within this space, particularly related to technical assistance programs, which we've heard aren't meaningfully reaching kind of entrepreneurs or immigrant entrepreneurs within the county. Part of the actions within the strategy also double downs on how these industry investments and these business growth opportunities are impacting underinvested communities. So how can the county invest in entrepreneurial clusters in communities who have been historically underserved, and what that might look like? And lastly, kind of thinking about work and training offerings, as we know that as innovation grows, as technology grows, those jobs require highly skilled individuals. So we want to focus on training in a way to ensure that all residents have access to these jobs and are trained for these particular jobs. And then lastly, the last strategy is around strengthening business retention and expansion infrastructure. This last strategy speaks to becoming a better partner in communities across the county who are facing interesting issues related to engaging with their businesses to respond to needs, or even businesses across the county who are still trying to ensure that they're responding to workforce needs or other financial needs that they have to grow. So actions within this strategy speak to the county playing greater leadership roles in connecting these communities to economic development resources at the state level, particularly related to site development. For example, the Minnesota DEED site program has been called out here. Further supporting suburban Ramsey County, for example, in activating entrepreneurial efforts and pursuits. Building better partnerships, as I mentioned earlier, with region or county-wide chambers to ensure business issues are addressed. And even thinking about business expansion financing and how the county can close the gap or close the financing gap and work closely with its partners to make sure businesses have the right financing tools to grow and expand within the region. So that's 8 strategies across 2 buckets, place-based and inclusion. And just to wrap up and recap, there are 4 kind of goals or strategies related to place-based inclusion, One's around improving and preserving supply. One's around transit-oriented development and ensuring inclusive economic development along those corridors. Another's around expanding affordable housing ownership opportunities, particularly for those communities who need it the most. And then thinking about equitable development and equitable site development in preparation. And then on the economic competitiveness side, it's thinking about COVID recovery and strengthening and accelerating the already existing workforce programs that are proving unique models of success. Developing entrepreneurial pathways for BIPOC owners, attracting high-wage industries in life sciences, advanced manufacturing, and tech. And lastly, strengthening capacity for business retention and expansion in support of communities. If Ramsey County can commit to these areas, we will truly see some success related to physical health, to inclusion, as Tawana noted earlier, and of course, economic resilience and recovery. So that's the overview of the strategies as they stand. I'm going to pause to ask for any questions, comments, or thoughts as you have them.
Thank you so much, Josh. I hope this presentation triggers everyone thinking about, we're doing a number of things. We're starting in many of these areas. And to me, this is validation that we are already on the right path and that we can dig deeper and go further. I want to open it up to questions. I do have Commissioner McDonough, followed by Commissioner Carter, and then Commissioner McGuire. So Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Madam Chair. There's a lot here, and this is really good work, and I really appreciate it. And I'm pretty confident you're going to see a lot of support here from this board and committing to this plan forward. Along the lines of the affordable housing, though, I'm not looking for adjustments here, but I really need to call this out because it doesn't get called out and it doesn't get talked about. In fact, the only person I ever really heard talk about it who was in a position to help make a difference was Sue Hag when she was chair of the Met Council. And it was related to a lot of the housing along Central Court, the Green Line, when we were, building it and getting ready for that. And I represent a community that really has a lot of this. And when we talk about naturally occurring affordable housing, NOAA housing, and I just Googled it, like the history, that term was never used before 2007. In fact, it was a think tank that actually challenged the New York mayor on housing, right? You don't need to subsidize no housing because New York City is full of naturally occurring affordable housing. And that's how it got termed. But today we use that, and when people reference it, it really is about, like 50 plus. I looked at the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, and we participate to help support preserving it. We put money in there, and it's a good thing. But they focus on 50 plus units. You tend to be apartment complexes built in the 40s and 50s that, are in jeopardy of being bought up by national developers. And we got to focus in on that. And it's got to be a part of the plan. And I see, what I'm seeing here on your NOAA plan. But the fact is the East Side has transitioned from owner occupied housing to rental housing that is just in poor shape. It's affordable, I call it by default, because there's no investment in that housing. It's unsafe for the people to live in. It's just, it's a terrible situation, and I never see solutions. And that's actually what that type of housing houses so many of our people, because it's not just the East Side, it's the North End, it's the Frogtown, it's the West Side. It's even creeping into the suburban communities, right? And it's these properties that become in such disarray that they're affordable by default. And the next owner doesn't invest and he sucks out the money and then he sells it and the next one comes in and there's never an investment. And, at some point I'd like to, and there was a little bit in your recommendations about, for landlords, for energy efficiencies for their housing and those types of things. But we've got to find a way to start having conversations about current affordable housing that so many of our people live in, but it's not safe, it's unhealthy. and it gets forgotten about. It's unseen, it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and we don't talk about it very often. So thanks for listening to my little rant there, but I'm committing to myself that is the more we talk about affordable housing, the more I need to remind ourselves about this huge access to affordable housing, for the only access to so many people, but it's not housing that any of us would ever even consider living in, letting alone a loved one or a friend live in. And we've got to start accepting the fact that we've got community living in these houses. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner McDonough, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think the idea of affordable housing needs to include the entire cost, and we know many of those houses aren't affordable to heat. They're not affordable to live in because of health conditions and other things, and energy efficiency, all of those things. And so you're absolutely right. And it isn't just limited to rental units, as we know. It's also owner occupied, where owners can't afford to maintain, or maybe they have aged and they're now on fixed incomes, or things have changed. And so it isn't, I want to make sure that we're addressing that it's not just renters, but it's the whole housing stock that we need to maintain affordability. So thank you for that. I didn't know if Josh or wanted to respond at all, or if we should.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. And I think part of our strategy too, where it talks about expanding affordable homeownership opportunities and housing stability, and even in our preservation around strategy 1, there is a bit of some call outs in terms of leveraging kind of existing both new funding sources to support kind of maintenance and home repair for those. I mean, we've heard in communities, one, there is the income issue, like people just don't have the money to do these things. But also from a senior housing perspective, people don't have the capacity or time to do them. So there is some nuance in these strategies related to that thought. But appreciate your comments. They're great ones.
Thank you, Josh. Commissioner Carter.
Thank you. I certainly support the comment that Commissioner McDonough has made. Affordable by default certainly can mean unlivable, and it is up to us to observe and to work together with our community, utilizing the ideas that are coming forward, the strategies that are coming forward, which not only help to make certain that people have decent, affordable housing to live in, but that also help to ensure that we are reinvesting and incenting reinvestment in those housing, in that housing stock, which does need to be decent, and which, but for lack of opportunity to kickstart that investment, could be affordable, decent, quality housing for both rental as well as potentially ownership. I appreciate the two categories of work that you've put forward. I must admit that as I look at it, I'm compelled to think into the place-based strategies here and the economic competitiveness strategies a little differently, because they're laid out a little differently. It occurs to me that in the place-based strategies, because of the work we're already doing, because of what we put in place recently in our housing stability office, we can grasp a hold of this work and begin to boldly think into it. I'm encouraged that you've already been working with the community. The timeline shows the extent to which this year's conversation has brought in community to help develop these recommendations. And our next steps now are going back out into community and having the discussions that we want to have with jurisdictions to think through this. So today, we're organized to give feedback about that, to support, to endorse, to ask deep questions about each of these areas. And I just wanted to get on the table that, while I can see more clearly the housing stability pieces, the pieces that have to do, I should say, with the place-based strategies, I can also see that in the workforce and economic development work that we've been doing with our economic development department and workforce, working collaboratively jointly together, we're also positioned well to begin to address those strategies and to engage the partnerships which we've been unfolding or discovering this past year that are standing ready to assist us in moving forward. Certainly, it's going to take a lot of work to visit these with those communities to understand that based on our support, which you will be hearing today and questions that we have, that there's support there as well, and that we have the partnerships that we need to advance all of this work. I just want to say it's really exciting. I know you can't detail, a timeline within which we can get all of this done today, but that's what I'm looking forward to. What's ready right now? Which pieces of these can we grab a hold of and begin to work forward? I'm certainly hoping that on the housing side, the affordable housing, which we've uplifted this past year, will continue to uplift or ready to go. The expanding a focus on housing stability, so important. And I think it was Tawana that said early on, all of these strategies pay back. I can certainly see how making certain we have people who are in one place, not as mobile as before, able to go to work, able to send their children to school, and able to continue and grow and develop as a part of our communities will pay us back multiple dividends. Clearly, that can be done within transit corridors as we look to those opportune spaces, that will make certain people are able to get to work and to get to those other locations. Working with those communities and making sure that we're utilizing innovative ways of drawing people in to do this work. As we know the partners and the abilities, but for some of the complexities that have existed in getting that work. And if we can make that pathway clearer, certainly we benefit again from having the ability for our residents to be engaged. And then the work we've got on the ground and expanding that work and right sizing it for the moment and for the future makes sense. I don't want to go through each one of those, and I'm starting to, but it's exciting to think about these strategies. I do not see a one that cannot be timed out, positioned, and placed in operation according to a timeline and a plan for a rollout strategy. Much appreciation to all of you for the work that's been done. I guess I don't really have a question. I would have said which of these are ready to go now, but as I look at them and visit with them, I think they're all based on a readiness and a practicality of building on the work we're doing within a timeline that we will see developing before us. If you have anything to add that in terms of how that happens, after our meetings with jurisdictions, et cetera, I'd love to hear it. I'm convincing myself already that this is a process of ongoing development and that I will see that working through as we continue to work together. I'll pause in case there is any response there. I'll quit then, okay?
That's music to our ears, Commissioner Carter. Music to our ears. I wanted to underscore two things. One, you talk about how the county is uniquely positioned to move forward on both place and economic competitiveness strategies. But I think in terms of our engagement over the year, we've been able to tap into what we know is already happening on the ground. So you're already positioned too, because of this much of this work is just happening just with greater county investment and leadership can really scale them to the potential that's needed to move the needle on economic progress. And that leads to kind of to your second point about what's first. So Carrie will kind of close us out at some point to talk about next steps. But the question is not necessarily what should we start first, as in we are starting things new, but more so, what capacity does the county have to make their first or second investment in these things that are already happening on the ground? So things are already moving even as we're speaking. It's just where the county wants to play a greater role in. And I think that happens over the next few months.
I would echo Josh's point and add one facet of recommendations that we do have included here in terms of some of the immediate things, Commissioner, around some investments and better coordination and some of the recommendations around being more, providing more transparent and accessible information to stakeholders about some of the existing programs and resources that exist, particularly to Commissioner McDonough's point, and those that each of you have raised so far about the resources that residents need around home improvements, especially for those low wealth, low income homeowners and residents for tenant protections, legal rights, et cetera. But we see those same needs as it relates to whether it's business development, workforce development, just making sure that we're continuing to invest in those resources that may exist, whether within the county or outside of the county, being sure that we're investing in as much as possible ready, available information for those, and resources that might be available in other languages and in vehicles that are most accessible to those residents, recognizing that times are shifting rather quickly in this particular environment and economy, and that it takes the nimbleness that we've seen the county be able to adapt to in particularly the last 6 months. But sometimes the ability to do that in crisis doesn't always continue when we shift out of that crisis moment. And so we have some recommendations around how to continue doing that into the future that can sustain and accelerate the economy, and particularly do so in a competitive and inclusive way.
Thank you so much, Tawana and Josh, for those comments. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I've just appreciated this discussion. I'm glad my colleagues, of course, have brought up the housing stability issues and others. I'm going to ask about the strategy 6 and 7, which goes to our business ownership and entrepreneurship, and this won't come as any surprise to any of you. You know, we all know these small businesses that are trying to do business in Ramsey County and get work under larger contracts. And I'm just thinking of a small minority-owned business in my community where she's an engineering firm and she wants to, you know, get work done, but she's too small to do it on her own. And they say, well, go under somebody else and do it there. Well, that doesn't always work. And so I'm just wondering, and I know it's probably called out here, but I just want to call it out that, you know, we have existing businesses that really need this work, and our current structure isn't necessarily helping them, you know, get that work. It's so I'm just hoping that within one of these areas that is going to be a focus area. And I'm agreeing with my colleague, Commissioner Carter, that, you know, the timeline, it feels like we've been asking for some of these things for a while, and I know we're doing some of them, and I just appreciate all of this work. So I'm of course going to be looking for the same kinds of timelines, like, okay, so when will we start when will we start with some of this this work that we've been talking about doing? And if you want to comment on that, I mean, I know it's being done, but it would just be interesting to see where it fits in with the plan that you've laid out here.
Yeah, I see County Manager Connor. Do you want to respond to that? Sure.
Commissioner, Madam Chair, I'll say I would suggest we separate the specific from the general in terms of movement forward, and we could talk more about that. To that point, you're right. I mean, it is an ambitious move forward on the work around procurement and engagement. I think looking through our open data portal and the annual procurement update to the board is going to be the measure of success as we move forward and see if the proof is in the pudding. I would say don't trust us, verify what we say as accurate. It all is a part of this broader plan, and it's where Director Collins and the entire CED team can't do this work alone, right? Like, a lot of this revolves around the idea that we do more work to engage with community. And so I appreciate you calling out the partnership between procurement and this area. I would just say, I can assure you that the brakes have not been hit, and there are plenty of daily arguments as we move forward in those spaces about how to move quickly and break through traditional barriers.
And Madam Chair, thank you. I really appreciate that. I don't mean to, I know we all want everything done immediately, and we appreciate that it takes time to get all these things done. And I absolutely agree. I was using it just as an example. I know we're talking general, not just specific instances. So it was just an example I was using. And so I appreciate all that you said and all the work that's being done.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner McGuire. Commissioner Fetham.
Thank you. So I'm reflecting on how, others have mentioned that some of this work is really seems to be aligned, that we're already moving in some of these areas. And I hope I'm not jumping ahead of anything, but I guess I'm wondering, at what point are we mapping or aligning work that's existing, that's happening already to these? How do we identify, where there's alignment, but maybe expansion or additional partnership needs to occur, where we need to, course correct or tweak the work that we're doing to encompass this? And then County Manager O'Connor referenced the open data portal, but is there a way to get this maybe into like a specific data dashboard so that we can track where are we now, where are we going, and then how are we getting there, so we identify, like, here's our goal of developing pathways to entrepreneurship and BIPOC business ownership. Here are the programs that exist. Here are the partners that we have. Here are where we're at now, and then we can keep coming back to that. Is there a plan for that? Could there be a plan for that? I guess I want to make sure this doesn't get lost, or we don't say, oh yeah, we're doing this, and it just kind of falls away.
Great. Anyone want to take that? Carrie?
Yeah, commissioners, I can touch base on maybe a few of these comments as we segue into the next slides. I think that will provide some context as well, if we're prepared to do that. Otherwise, we can actually, if you wouldn't mind going back to the last slide, I would like to just illustrate here. Unless there are other questions, I can kind of move us through the next few.
Yeah. I just want to check in quick. Commissioner McDonough, you had your hand up and down, and so I want to make sure if you have another question, you have the opportunity.
I'll keep listening here, and maybe it'll get answered. And
okay,
if not, I'll put my hand back up.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, Carrie, I think that it's a good transition. Commissioner Fretham set you up for the right next answer, so I'll turn it to you.
First, I'd just like to start by announcing that Josh Devine has taken a new job. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But what I would like to say is that there's something larger to Josh Devine taking a new job. And I'd just like to share what his title is now, because he is a very modest person. You would think he were native to Minnesota here. But he is the Director of Racial Economic Equity for the National Community Reinvestment Coalition in DC. How incredible is that? And how incredible that we are in an era where equity leadership positions are now becoming expectations. And so in addition to the wonderful work he's done for this plan, he's off to really bright things. So thank you, Josh. But I didn't want to miss that opportunity. In terms of the slide that you should see before you, I want to help you understand in terms of how we grounded some of these strategies. Ramsey County Economic Competitiveness and Inclusion, you'll recall that became a strategic priority last year. And underneath that strategic priority, we've got 2 Ramsey County goals. So these are taken already from our vision mission goals, and we've built out these strategies underneath them and the outcomes. So we have the vision mission goals to the point that the commissioners have made. We are doing work in a variety of spaces, absolutely. And we want to enhance and amplify and accelerate and become more aggressive. And I would just say the board meeting this morning is one illustration of that. You had over 306 affordable housing units between preservation and supply on the docket this morning that you advanced in various ways and in new and different ways. And so we are using this plan to say, this is the place we want to be. We value this, and we're going to continue to align resources accordingly. So if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide, let's talk a little bit about next steps and timeline. So we do have a little bit more work to do. This is a very, very synthesized PowerPoint presentation that you've received around 8 strategies. And what you're not seeing is what we are referring to behind the scenes as the roadmap. And that has the how. And the how includes a spreadsheet that has close to 50 agencies that will help us leverage funds, advance and create new programs, And underneath these strategies are what we're calling recommended actions. Many have quite a few that will help steer the direction and future resources of Ramsey County. That roadmap and the larger plan is what the board will review and consider for adoption in March. So here's how we plan to proceed over the next few months. We are hosting this today, and then in January, we are having our economic leads, whether that be through the economic development summits with our city partners or the East team. They're going to be reviewing these strategies and some of the recommended actions to ensure that we're not missing the mark. We have tentatively scheduled the elected officials summit on February 3rd, and that worked with all of your schedules. Thank you to Martha and team for sifting through between the city council's various calendars around public meetings and your calendars as well. We landed on February 3rd, and then March will be the unveiling. In addition to this workshop and March, we have partnered with 3 local artists who plan to illustrate and bring the plan to life. This plan is centered around people and ensuring equity is at the center of all things that we do in economic development and beyond. And we have 3 local artists that are going to take various aspects of the plan elements and bring community wealth building to life, bring all of that human-centered strategy to life. So we're really excited about that. All right, if you want to advance to the next slide here. Now to Commissioner McDonough, your point around preservation, this plan does certainly prioritizes preservation. I've been describing it as we don't want to keep pouring water into a leaky bucket. And we do lose quite a few naturally occurring affordable housing units each year. And they very much are in need of rehabilitation and reinvestment. And so what this plan does, and this gets to Commissioner Fretham's comment as well, is it creates a baseline in terms of fiscal health, a baseline in terms of where no housing is located, where subsidized housing is located, so that we can benchmark ourselves in a way that we haven't before against this plan. So the assessor's office, in addition to Minnesota Housing Partnership data, they've been working through and fine-tuning a NOAA unit analysis, which allows us to see where is affordable housing located across various AMI bands. And then there will be a layer for subsidized housing as well. That map plans to roll out at the same time of the vision plan, and we will reference the map and have a graphic within the vision plan as well. Preservation is critical to ensuring that our large-scale multifamily development properties aren't just flipping and turning over to market rate while we're putting money into supply. So we absolutely hear you on that. All right, and next slide, please. We talked a little bit about engagement, and I just want to stress that we did have thousands of individuals engaged. We did have, at the very beginning of this process, Josh and the Fourth Economy team had interviews with our city partners, talking about everything about their community. And that was this past year, we had aggressive engagement during a global pandemic, and we still had so many interested individuals across agencies and the public wanting to be a part of this process, which just shows how critical it is. And out of the vision plan, we heard this quote, which has been this reoccurring theme. The cost of inaction is too great. Hold on, my box is covering in here. If we wish to chart a path toward recovery and create a more resilient future, then we must ensure our commitment to our most vulnerable residents. When our most vulnerable residents thrive, we all thrive. What a wonderful quote, and what wonderful alignment with our vision, mission, goals, and with the essential heart of this plan. I want to talk a little bit about some of the strategies and how the plan should be viewed. As mentioned, this is a snapshot in time. This is not okay, we've got the economic development work plan and let's put it in action. We will put it into action, but the goal is to get that NOAA inventory reevaluated every 6 months. The goal is to ensure that this is a living and breathing document that is evolving with the landscape. We know, especially in terms of workforce, that there's going to be an assessment of the landscape, if you will, post-COVID-19. So we want to continue to to do the work with the Center for Economic Inclusion, with other agency partners to say, okay, where do we need to tweak these strategies and recommendations, and where do we need to channel different resources? So the idea is that this plan is going to evolve. We started this work before the creation of a housing stability department. And we know that they need to build their department and build capacity there. And there's going to be a wonderful alignment with community and economic development on the supply side of things. And so in terms of putting these kind of strategies into action items, you know, there may be positions already working through the pipeline that will come to fruition as early 2021, so that we can hit the ground running and have the capacity to be able to do some of the recommended actions that you'll see come March. So right there, I'll pause, and I think the last slide is just a opportunity for questions and feedback.
Thank you, Carrie. I want to open it up if there are questions to Carrie, especially on the timeline, and make sure your other questions were answered. So Commissioner Carter.
Thank you. So that's just what happens when you see one picture and then you see another picture that looks a lot like it, and you don't realize it's two separate pictures, the first and the second timeline. Thank you for moving us forward in the second. I regret that I didn't look closely enough at it to see that these are the steps that we are asking for. This is the beginning timeline, and thank you for the acknowledgement of what goes behind all of this in terms of the more detailed work plan that you have already been building. So I just wanted to express excitement, looking so forward to the next few months and the opportunity to see this come back fully fleshed out with all of the content that moves us far beyond March and public rollout. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? All right, I just want to thank everyone who has worked really hard on this. I think it's been a long process, and we've been anxious, but it is a lot of hard work over time has resulted in a clear, thought out plan and proposals as we move forward, and a way for us to track it. So I just want to turn it back over to Carrie for any final thoughts.
No, thank you so much for your leadership and for the opportunity to engage in this work. We have a tremendous consultant team and tremendous staff. Martha Faust has been incredible in keeping us in a line. Josh, we're going to miss you, but we know you're off to big and brighter things. And we know that there's a lot of work to do, and we're prepared to do that. So thank you so much for the leadership of this board. We're really excited about this plan and the work that will come. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Josh, I echo that when you're in DC doing big things, remember, don't forget about this little tiny county and the great work that you did here, and use us as an example of how it can be done as you move forward. And I know County Manager O'Connor wanted to have some final thoughts as well, so I'll turn it over to you, Ryan.
I just wanted to underscore, Madam Chair, how this lays the foundation as we move into next year for these conversations, not only about the strategy and the vision, but then the tools to execute against it, and the levy and the conversation around an economic development levy in Ramsey County and what that looks like, and its importance to doing this work. You can't do it without resources available to do it, and that's going to be a big part. And I know everyone here knows that, but I think we have a much more compelling and integrated case to tell than maybe a few years ago in that space, and looking forward to that. The other one that we will continue to work on is this continued conversation around how we measure housing and transportation as a shared measure across our community in our performance measures. It's something that we've talked about for a while, and this just continued to make it very clear. So thank you for those chance to share that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any last comments from anyone? And I also want to thank Commissioner Reinhardt, who has been participating in this all along, and as the Vice Chair of HRA has been really engaged in this work as well. And so I just wanted to say that too. And thank you all. I appreciate it, and we look forward to now putting the plan into action, and have a nice afternoon. With that, we are resigned.
Great job, all. Thanks so very
Thanks,
much.
everyone. Thanks
Take
for all your
care.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Good work.